So on the agenda today, Nate is going to cover a few topics. Should I hire an outside firm to write estimates? What are some of the industry facts, benefits of in-house estimating, cons of in-house estimating, and the benefits of outside estimating? So without further ado, I am going to drop my share for Nate to pick it up.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate it. So glad to be speaking. Glad to be back with PSA. Kristen and I have known each other for what, 3 or 4 years, Kristen, when I was at the other company?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we still use PSA actually with our consulting business now to keep track of all of our stuff. So it's fantastic. So I want to say thank you for letting us share today. It's kind of funny. I have to give a little bit of background. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen and just make sure. Okay. Do you see, Kristen, just so I know, yes. Do you see the big RMS logo?
Sure do.
Okay, perfect. So just a little bit of background. I came from the restoration industry and had helped start a company about 16 years ago and had built the company. I'd say we were pretty successful. And then about 6 months ago, went into the consulting side with my partner, Greg Sargent. He's been doing it for the past 4 or 5 years. With that, I talked to Ryan with PSA during all of this because we wanted to start using PSA ourselves to keep track of all of our clients. And that's when we started talking a little bit about the lunch and learn and some of the options out there to discuss things. So I asked him if there was anything special that I should talk about, and he gave a few ideas. I wanted to do something that was different that you guys don't hear about all the time. So we decided that we were going to talk about estimating, and I have to give a little bit of the background or the story why we chose estimating. With our clients that we currently consult with, I probably had in the past 2 months, 60 to 70% of them during our coaching calls, they were all asking me, hey, Nate, do you know any outside companies that will write estimates for us? So I started doing all this research because I wanted to make sure that we provided a good service for them. So I started researching different estimating companies and finding out a little bit more about them, some of the things they offered, some of the things they didn't offer. And I realized after a month or two, I was like, why in the world are we sending them to somebody that we don't know? In many cases, a lot of our clients were not happy with the outside services that they were getting. And so I went to Greg, my partner, and talked about it. And I said, Greg, I know enough adjusters that have retired, enough adjusters that are in the industry, and a lot of estimators who all know how to write estimates. Why don't we just start writing these estimates in-house so that when we coach our clients, we're going to be able to know the types of things that they're missing on their jobs. You know, are they putting the right amount of equipment? Are they treating the categories of water the right way? So from there is where our idea came to start doing that. So we've got estimators that are writing them for us. Me and Greg review the estimates before they go to make sure that we've got stuff in there. And so that's why we chose this topic, is hopefully anybody that's on the call today has asked the same question. Should I be writing the estimates in-house? Should I be using an outside firm? And I'm not going to say that one is right or one is wrong, but I wanted to talk about some of the things that I've seen over my past 16 years of doing this, of just some of the pros and the cons, so that you guys can decide what's best for you. So with that being said, let's go ahead and we'll get started with everything. And if anybody has questions, Kristen told me to hold off till the end, and that's perfect. Sometimes I get nervous if I talk too much. So please, as I'm talking, if there's anything that I say that sparks a question for you guys, let me know, and go ahead and write it in the chat button, and we'll make sure that we talk about those things. So I wanted to go over just a few of the industry facts of kind of what's going on in the industry. Some of these numbers are directly related to our clients that we work with, but I don't think these numbers are too far off from the industry standard. But 80 to 90% of our clients are currently using an estimate writing company, or they have used one in the past. Now, as I go to other consulting groups and as I listen to other restoration companies, and these are some pretty big companies, some of them are 30, 40, $50 million companies, I would say the majority of them have all used an outside firm to write estimates. It doesn't mean they were using them exclusively, but at some point in time, they have or are still using an outside firm. The nice thing about what's happening now, and I think COVID definitely sped all of this up, is the fact that technology has drastically changed everything. During COVID, many of you know that a lot of the adjusters and a lot of the estimators were not getting into the houses because they didn't want to obviously pass COVID along to others. And so we had a lot of this on-site stuff where homeowners could use certain technologies or certain apps, or our technicians were able to use certain apps such as Matterport or DocuSketch and be able to go in and really collect a lot of data without having to send multiple people into a house to get everything. So this is going to be a major game changer. We used Matterport at my last company exclusively. The majority of our clients now that we consult use DocuSketch. Hover, I had a chance to fly out to San Francisco to their headquarters to be able to help be on a panel with them with some of the technologies that they're changing and introducing to the insurance industry. So there's just a lot of really, really awesome technology that's making it so that you don't necessarily have to be on site to write an estimate. So with that, technology has really helped bump up, I think, the speed in which if somebody wants to use an outside estimating company, it makes it a whole lot easier than what maybe 3 to 4 to 5 years ago. So let's just go over, and like I said, I don't want this to be a sales pitch as to whether you should or shouldn't, but I do want to create some questions that hopefully everybody thinks in their mind. So what are some of the benefits of having an in-house estimator? And I think that's in some cases really obvious, in other cases not so obvious. But when you have an in-house estimator, typically you should, in theory, have greater control over your employees versus using an outside firm. And what I mean by that is if you have a question, you can hopefully go walk into the estimator's office and say, hey, what are we doing on this job? Or the estimator can go to the technicians and talk to them directly. So there's definitely a benefit of being able to go to your employees and ask them specific questions about the job. If you do hire the right person, the keyword being the right person that is well-trained and not overworked, they should be familiar with Xactimate, and they should be able to write a pretty good estimate. So we know that Xactimate has different courses, different levels of proficiency, and assuming that you cannot overwork your estimator, if they are well trained in those areas, they should be able to write a really good estimate for you and hopefully, get the margins and be able to pick up some of the tricks of the trade and certain things that you can bill for. With that being said, so the question is, what are some of the disadvantages of having in-house estimating? And I think anybody will probably agree to these. They're pretty obvious as far as disadvantages goes, but in-house estimators can be expensive. So if you look at the time for what you pay for their salary, their benefits, their workers' comp, their taxes, if you really try to figure out what their burden rate is, you probably would be surprised how much you're paying a guy to write estimates for you. And typically an estimator, I know everybody uses the term a little bit differently, whether it's an estimator, project manager, whatever that might be. In many cases, these guys are going out to the job, they're scoping it, and then they're coming back to the office and writing an estimate. Most of the surveys, if you kind of get on all the job boards and the restoration magazines and all that with R&R, it seems that the trend is that most people who are in-house employees writing estimates cannot keep up with the workload. I would say, Greg, my partner's on this phone call today, I'd say 90% of our clients currently, one of their biggest complaints is they do not have time to write an estimate. And if they do have time to write an estimate, 90% of them are admitting that they are not spending enough time to write a good detailed estimate. And so what happens in that case, and I saw it just from me being in the industry, is you have your employees who start writing an estimate simply to get them off the desk. They just want to get the paperwork, they want to send it out, but unfortunately they're leaving a lot of money and a lot of details on the table because they don't have enough time to focus and to really try to write an awesome estimate. The other thing that we've recognized, and this especially seems to happen with newer employees or people that have not been in the industry for quite a while, is that many of the estimators are typically missing at least 10 to 20% on their bills. And when I say 10 to 20%, we're talking about revenue and just items that they could be billing for that they aren't. As we all know, there's lots of classes out there that can teach you the tips and the tricks, but how many companies really send their people to those classes? If they don't, they just keep doing the same thing over and over and over because they don't know where to look in Xactimate to be able to find different billing codes or different ways in which you can bill something, with Xactimate or Symbility. It doesn't matter which one you're using. A lot of times there's 4 or 5 different codes that you can use for the same item. One of them is a lot cheaper. One of them might be more expensive. And so sometimes the employees just are not educated enough to know how to use those certain tricks in the industry. The other con or disadvantage is could your estimator be generating more income if they weren't stuck writing estimates? So if you have a guy who is going out in the field and sketching it, the question is how much more time and how many more jobs could he be going to and running if he didn't have to come back to the office and write estimates? I had called one of my estimators that I've known prior to coming over to the consulting side of things, and he is he probably writes some of the best estimates I've ever seen. And I asked him, I said, how much of your time is spent out in the field going to the job and then coming back and writing an estimate? And he said that probably 50% of his time is driving to the job, and then the other 30 to 40% of his time is coming back and writing an estimate. So the question is, what if you could free up that 30 to 40% of their day to allow them to be doing stuff that actually will generate more income on each of their jobs? I have found that with your small to medium-sized companies, that many times it's the owner or the general manager that's writing the estimates. This is typically a scenario for a disaster, because if you're the owner or the general manager writing them, that means that you are missing out on running your business in all the areas that are super important. So a lot of our owners complain they just don't have enough time to do all the stuff they want to. And typically the estimates is the first thing that they set aside because they're trying to put out all the other fires. And then they go and write estimates when the adjuster or when the homeowner or when somebody's yelling at them saying, hey, I need this estimate. That's when they finally decide to work on it. So some pretty obvious disadvantages. I think the biggest one is just what is the cost of money or revenue that you're losing by having to write estimates? What other things could you do that would be a better use of your time? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about if you decide to use an outside firm to write your estimates. So I think the obvious ones, we talked about the disadvantages of being in-house. So the benefits of obviously using an outside firm are going to be pretty obvious, but it should allow the company to focus on more profitable tasks that hopefully are going to generate greater income. So if you use an outside firm, how many hours per week would you save by not having to write an estimate? Is it 5 hours? Is it 10 hours? Is it 15 hours? And then whatever that time is, what are the other activities you could be doing that would be generating another source of revenue for you? So I think that's a big question everybody should ask themselves. If you're using an outside firm, hopefully they have good estimate writers, right? That's the hope and the wish. Some of them are great. Some of them are not so good. But a good estimate writer will generally net you higher margins on your jobs. So they should know the tips and the tricks of the trade. They write estimates all day long. So they should be learning and knowing about all those little things that you just go, hey, this is going to get me more revenue on each job. They should be helping eliminate unnecessary headaches. Because the majority of owners complain that they're always behind trying to send off estimates. So what would happen for an owner or another estimator if you go, hey, we were able to get our estimates sent off in 24 to 48 hours, whereas before maybe it was taking you 1 to 2 weeks to get stuff sent. So what would the value be if by the time you send them all your documents, there's an estimate in your email folder in 24 to 48 hours? What would that do for the revenue of your company? How much more money would that allow you so you can start spending it on other avenues to be able to generate income? So there's quite a few benefits that hopefully it should free up for you. The other big one that I've noticed is most of your outside firms, they've got a system in place. They're not trying to juggle 10 other things. They're not having to talk to their sheetrocker. They're not having to talk to their flooring guy. They're not having to do this. They are sitting in an office writing estimates, and they don't have all the other distractions that obviously an estimator or a project coordinator is going to run in throughout the day. So they can focus and they can get stuff done. Like I said, if anybody has any questions, I'm not used to talking completely through a presentation. So if anybody wants to chat on there, go ahead, just so I know I'm not putting everybody to sleep. Okay, so let's go. Let's just do a couple examples here so you can kind of look at it. Now, these are numbers that I came up with kind of based upon industry averages of other companies that I've worked with and just being in the industry as long as I have. So if you look at what you're probably paying an estimator, and once again, when I use an estimator, everybody has a different term for what they use for that person. But the average salary for one of those guys seems to be typically around $70,000 to $90,000. That's going to be their salary. That does not include a truck, doesn't include gas, doesn't include the benefits or the workers' comp. That is just typically their salary. So their actual burden rate is probably closer to about $100,000 for that position. So I talked about this earlier, sorry, I kind of jumped the boat here, but the percentage of time that those guys are going to write estimates is 50% of their day if they have to drive to the job and scope the loss. And then the other 30% is coming back to the office and writing it. So if you're paying somebody close to 100K and they're spending 50% of their day on the road, driving from job to job to job so that they can scope it, so they can look at it, so they can talk to the homeowner, how much money is that you're losing on just driving to jobs? Well, it's going to be approximately about $35,000 to $45,000 of their salary goes towards writing estimates alone. So that's a pretty big number. If you break it down and go, wow, I'm paying a guy just to be writing the estimates, and then all the other stuff, 35 to 45 of that is going towards their salary for writing an estimate. So the question is, could you do it cheaper, right? So if you have two estimators, in my company, we had 8 or 9 or 10 at any given time that we're writing estimates. But let's just say you have two estimators at your company. If you're paying them 35 to 40,000 broken out for writing estimates, and that includes their drive time and coming back, you're spending close to about 80 grand with just two employees to write estimates. So what do we think a good estimator could write based upon the industry numbers that I hear over and over? A good estimator is probably around 2 to 3 million. I'm sure there's some guys that can do 4 to 5. There's some that are only at $1 million. So I just chose the 2 to 3 million. So if they can write 2 to 3 million, what could an in-house estimator who does nothing but writes estimate, what could they write? So I called one of my buddies who works for another company, and he does nothing but write estimates for a very, very large restoration company. And last year alone, he wrote $15 million in estimates. That's one guy. I know what he makes. He makes $70,000 a year. So if you have a person that could really write 15 million a year and you paid him 70,000, that one person has already equaled what you're paying all your employees. And then you got all the other headache that would go with that. And so your savings can be fairly significant with an outside firm. Now, as I say that, keep in mind, outside firms are not perfect. Does that mean that they'll write an estimate and you never have to look at it? You don't need to review it? Does it mean they don't have mistakes? Absolutely not. I'm not insinuating that. This estimator who wrote over 15 million last year, he told me something that kind of stuck in my brain. He told me that on his large loss estimates that he writes, based upon what his estimators are providing him with, he's about 80 to 85% accurate on those estimates. And so there's about a 20% fluff factor where he has to go back and he has to get more details. He has to ask them questions just to kind of nail things down and get the nitty gritty. If it's a smaller job, so we'll say it's 20,000 or a lot less, he said they're about 90% accurate on the estimates there, meaning there's still 10% that they still have to talk to somebody to figure it out. So understand, if you do use an outside estimator, that yes, there is still some stuff that you should review before you send the file off, just to make sure that they didn't quote unquote miss anything. However, I think it's safe to say that even if you have your own estimator that is an employee, you probably have to review theirs because they're probably missing 10 to 20% as well, based upon that type of thing. Okay, so I just did a little bit of math here. And once again, these are averages. I know things can change, so I don't want this to be doctrine as far as that goes. But your average estimate is $200 to $400 for a claim that is less than 20,000. So if you're paying an outside firm based upon all the phone calls I made, based upon the rates that we charge, you're typically going to be $200 to $400 for a claim less than $20,000. The turn time that you should be expecting those, most companies tell you that they will have you the estimate within 24 to 48 hours. The nice thing about it is there's no need to send out a separate estimator to scope the jobs. With the technology that we have now, your technicians should be able to get all of the information that we need, or whichever company you hire to write it, they should be able to capture all that information without sending out a project coordinator in most cases. So if they're using DocuSketch, if they're using Matterport, if they're using any, Hover or anything like that, 9 times out of 10, when the technicians respond to the loss, they should be able to give you enough information. A lot of our clients use Encircle. Some people use Clean Claims, whatever it might be. There's enough information there that you should be able to send that file over to an estimator and they can write an estimate for you. So with that, we feel that a good estimator can typically capture 10 to 30% more in revenue than an in-house person, simply because they don't have all the distractions. They typically have more training. They understand Xactimate or Symbility better than the average person, and they've taken the time to be able to see some of the tricks that exist out there. Okay, so what about a hybrid model? So I've talked about just doing it in-house. I've talked about subbing it out, using somebody else. A lot of companies actually are using a little bit of a hybrid. There's no reason why you have to go exclusive outside or exclusive inside. So some of the companies that we talk to, if the job is a small, simple one, say it's $10,000 or less, they've kind of learned the macros, they've learned the templates, they've set those up, and they just write those in-house because they already know there's only going to be 20 to 30 line items that they have to know. They've memorized them, they put them on, and they write that estimate, and they get it off their desk and send it right away. And then you have some of those large jobs where a lot of the companies are like, I'm not experienced enough to write a large loss. I don't know how to write rebuild estimates. I only know how to write mitigation estimates. There's a lot of companies out there that have no idea how to write a rebuild estimate. So in those cases, they go, we're going to use our outside firm and we're going to have them write those estimates for us. I don't think there's anything wrong with the hybrid model at all. The other times when you do the hybrid model is, let's just say you have a catastrophic event from Mother Nature. You get 100 jobs in a month. There is no way you want to be paying one of your guys to sit there and write estimates when you know that he should be out signing up jobs, selling jobs, running jobs. In those cases, start sending it to an outside firm, let them pay them the money for it, know that you're going to make way more money on the back end by selling jobs versus sitting in an office and writing estimates all day. So I think the hybrid model is a great option for a lot of people based upon what your experience is. Okay, so here would be a couple of questions to ask yourself. So time versus money. What revenue producing activities does your company miss out on by having to write estimates? So if you're doing it in-house, what other things is it precluding you from being able to do that you should be doing? Are your current estimators, are they master estimate writers? Are they really good, or are they just kind of good? If the answer is no, how much money are you leaving on the table with every job that you do? And how much does that add up to over a year? Is that 50,000 a year? Is that 100,000 a year? Is that 200,000? How much are you missing out on because your people are not capturing what they should? And then the other question is just revenue, right? What is the likelihood of you getting paid sooner if estimates can be sent off within 24 to 48 hours? What is that going to do for your accounts receivable? What is that going to do so that you've got money in the bank? We were talking to one of our clients just yesterday, and we kind of counseled them and said, hey, you need to start collecting money or you're going to be in a really big financial, in a bad spot. He originally says, I'm fine, don't worry about it, I'm fine. But after we talked to him for a half hour last night, we got an email from him saying, I'm so grateful you told me to go check my accounts receivable. I had an $80,000, $70,000 job that I was unaware of, and I almost was out of money in the bank. Thank you so much. So the question is, how much more revenue can you be bringing in much quicker so that you can financially support all the other stuff that you need to do? Okay, so Kristen had told me about 30 minutes of talking. I've done all my talking. So would like to just go if anybody has any questions about it. So I guess a little bit. So yes, we do write estimates, long story short. We have a team of estimate writers. We are the 24 to 48 hour turnaround time in most cases. All of our estimate writers currently that we have been in the industry for more than 10 years. So they are not new to this industry in any way, shape, or form. We do mitigation estimates, we do asbestos, we do rebuild. So we do just about every type of estimate that you can think of. As of yet, we have not run into one that we can't write. Not to say that won't happen, but we do all types of estimate writing. So would love to open it up. Kristen, I don't know if you talk at this point or not, but if anybody has any questions or in the chat feature that they want to talk about, happy to talk about those things.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. So if any questions, just enter them in the chat box. As I mentioned, this will be published to our YouTube channel and on our website. And for those folks that registered, it will be uploaded to their Dropbox. So if we miss anybody or miss any questions and you think of after the fact, you can reach out to Nate directly. His email is on the screen.
Yes, if anybody does, if they have any questions about what we provide, we're happy to talk about it. Obviously, all of you use PSA. So the good thing is I use PSA. I know how to navigate around it as well. So we will have something in common for sure when it comes to the PSA aspect.
Hey, Nate, are you okay if I make a comment?
Oh yeah, go ahead. So Greg is my partner, just so you know. So I probably paid him to make a comment.
No, the biggest thing for me when I started using an outside estimator probably 10 years ago or so was the fact that they increased our job average by about 30%. So that's one of the reasons why we do this. The other reason why is so many companies, like Nate said, and depending on your size, but a lot of startups or under $2 million companies, the struggle is marketing. And so you have people who are either the owners are writing estimates and they're not out marketing, or you've got someone who's writing all these estimates instead of going out and selling jobs. And so we've just found so many of our clients they're so much more profitable when they decide to get some help. So whether that's getting an in-house person who does an absolutely great job and doesn't miss stuff for you, about that 20, 30%, or getting somebody else who's going to look at their best interest. But it allows you to do marketing, whether that's focusing more on online marketing like we help our clients with, or network marketing to plumbers, realtors, agents, property managers, that's that having time to do all the things. So we find so many clients of ours either have a low job average because the estimating is not up to par, or they just don't have enough time to grow the business. So they miss out on the marketing piece of their business, which is what we help them with growing their businesses, the marketing piece of it so much. So we found that, again, it's just, if you've got the right person, great, he or she can be a great asset, but have someone else verify those for you that's looking from the outside in to make sure your jobs aren't missing things on a consistent basis. And then also the whole accounts receivable part, who's negotiating with the insurance companies to, verify what is right, what's wrong, what was accepted, what wasn't, how much are you going to negotiate. So anyways, just appreciate you guys having us on here, and hopefully this has been of some benefit.
Yeah, no, and just to add on to that, thank you, Greg. One thing, I think I mentioned Symbility. We know that they're taking a role in stuff now with Xactimate. So we do, one of our estimators, he is trained in Symbility as well as Xactimate. So I don't know, on some of the TPA work out there, they're starting to use that. I know a lot of companies are not wanting to learn another program, so they don't even want to touch Symbility. So for those that are listening, if you don't know Symbility and you have a certain carrier that's wanting to use it, we do have an estimator who is well-versed in Symbility as well. So. Well, Kristen, if there's anything else, I don't know, or if anybody has questions.
Yeah, if we don't have any questions from the floor, we can wrap up the call. And again, if you do have any after the fact, you can reach out to Nate or Greg directly.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us on. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, Nate. Pleasure as always.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Okay.